The Silence of the Lambs is arguably the best psychological horror thriller of all time, and the Best Picture winners had a long-lasting legacy. Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're analysing the movie to talk about all the creepy hidden details that you might have missed. Peeling back the skin of the movie actually revealed a lot of hidden things and some deeper symbolism that makes it even more terrifying. Now, the film is of course based on the book of the same name, which I reread for this breakdown. It offers a couple of insights to the characters that make them even more sinister than what we get on screen. Although the film is packed with them, the first creepy detail I want to talk about is in the poster. Voted by Premiere as being the 16th greatest movie poster ever made, it has a subliminal image within it. If we zoom in on the pattern on the moth's head, we can see that these are women arranged to look like a human skull. This is actually Salvador Dali's enveloped as Moors, and it plays into the themes of the film. Buffalo Bill's fascinated with moths and butterflies, especially their transformations. Bill wants to become a woman, and thus women being on the death head moth has a deeper layer to it. This death head marking is also a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's The Gold Bug. The bug in the story is supposed to signify change and redemption, with the character Legrand believing that it's gonna alter his life for the better. Butterflies and moths are seen throughout the film in obvious and less obvious ways. Clarice is of course tipped by the moth at the hour 42 mark, which lets her know this is Buffalo Bill. A moth cocoon is also removed from the mouth of one of his victims, which helps to identify the killer. This was actually made from a gummy bear wrapped in a Tootsie Roll in case the actress lying there swallowed it. Beyond that though, there's a butterfly outside the first victim's house, which we can see about the hour 27 mark. Clarice then goes inside her room and we can see butterflies on the wallpaper. On top of that, the way Bill dies is almost like an insect. He lies on his back with his arms curled up, with those black goggles being like bug eyes. Now, Clarice could have figured things out a couple of seconds earlier if she'd also remembered to check her corners. Upon entering the room with Bill, we see a painting in the top right that gives away exactly who this is. If she'd noticed that, she could have stopped him sooner and then not had to go into the basement below. This idea of not checking her corners ties back into the film earlier when we saw the character in a training exercise.
Where's your danger area?
In the corner, sir.
Did you check the corner?
No, sir.
That's the reason you're dead.
So had she done this, she'd have figured things out, which is some amazing attention to detail. Now, the training scene was originally going to open the movie, and it would kind of show she was wet behind the ears. However, Jodie Foster felt this was too much of a cliche way to open the film, and this convinced them to put it later in the movie. What we get here is her running through the woods alone, while everyone else exercises in groups. Normally, this could be something that's a throwaway shot, but in this film, it has its own deeper meaning. This all ties into the title of the movie and Clarice's character journey as a whole. Now, when Hopkins got the script, he thought The Silence of the Lambs meant it was a kid's film. However, as we learn throughout the piece, this ties back to a defining moment in Clarice's childhood. We learn Clarice grew up on a sheep ranch in Montana where she'd often hear the cries of sheep in the night. Sneaking out, she saw them being slaughtered and tried to intervene by opening up the gate. The sheep refused to move, so she picked up a lamb and ended up running out into the forest. Thus, this opening scene ties into that, and it also highlights how alone the character is. She's still that girl running through the woods with her not being taken seriously by men. As we learn, she was captured with the lamb and then escorted back to the ranch by the sheriff. The lamb was killed and Clarice couldn't save it, with his deafening silence now haunting her. This entire film is a chance at redemption, with her wanting to save these women from the slaughter. Bill could represent the sheriff coming out to stop her, but in the end she manages to win out. Lambs are of course a symbol of innocence, and these women are innocent victims as well. If she can save them, maybe the lambs will stop screaming in her nightmares, which is why Lecter asks her this at the end.
Have the lambs stopped screaming?
Now, the silence of the lambs can be taken one of two ways, with the screaming being both a positive and negative. The lambs, or rather victims that we see throughout the film, may be silent for one of two reasons. The more negative version is because they're dead, whereas they might stop screaming because they've been saved. Now, originally they were going to go shoot a flashback with the young Clarice where we'd see her running with the lamb. The plan was then to cut back and forth from this as Clarice was talking. However, Foster's monologue was so good that director Jonathan Demme yelled cut and then said, "Well, I guess we aren't going to Montana." Lambs also appear frequently throughout the movie, and we see them almost as much as the moths. When investigating the first victim's house, we cut to a photo with lambs beside a model of a shepherd. Clarice also tries to be a savior as well, which is something she eventually grows into. This idea of religion's also seen in the picture Lecter draws, which has Clarice holding a lamb. In the background, we can see three crosses, again carrying over from this Jesus imagery. It's clear that this picture is akin to Mother Mary holding the baby Jesus, with Jesus also being referred to as the Lamb of God. Lecter also crucifies one of the gods before escaping. Also, we see Lecter's last meal before escaping is lamb chops.
Son of a bitch demanded a second dinner. Lamb chops, extra rare.
Which kind of shows how sadistic he is, as he just heard this harrowing story and the first thing he wanted to do was order lamb. Beyond that though, when the victim walks out at the end, we see her holding Bill's little dog. This is wide and almost lamb-like, with her refusing to let go. This subtly builds off Clarice's backstory when she refused to let go of the lamb when the police picked her up. There, the men of course took it away, and even to this day, they still look down on her. There's several shots where we see them staring directly at her, with a group of policemen being the most notable. However, there's lots of moments where men stare directly at the character, which is also done for a very specific reason. This is seen in the case of Jack Crawford at the start, who talks to Clarice by looking directly into the camera. Lecter, of course, has these long creepy stares where he looks directly at her, and Buffalo Bill does the same thing as well. When he finally answers the door to Clarice, we see things directly through her eyes. Subliminally, that places us in her shoes and helps us to relate to the character more. It also helps to hammer home how men always stare at her, which is something they also hammer home in some background items. When Clarice goes to Dr. Chilton's office, you can see a picture hanging up to the left. This has 4 men all staring at her, cementing this idea even further. To the right hand side of her, we can also see some orchids, with orchid meaning testicle in Greek. Most men don't take her seriously and refuse to help, which is seen throughout the film. Around the 23-minute mark, we see her at the yourself storage, and even though she's got difficulty opening up the door, we still get lines like this.
I would ask my driver to help you, but he detests physical labor.
So the character is truly alone. Now though I'm harping on a lot about this point, the main reason I've brought it up is because it's one of the major things that I think differentiated this from Manhunter. Yes, though many people believe this is the first time we saw Hannibal Lecter on screen, he was actually a major part of the movie Manhunter. Starring Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter and William Peterson as Will Graham, this was technically the first film. Adapting Red Dragon, it's almost the exact same story as this plot-wise. We have a caged Lecter giving advice to an FBI agent who's trying to track down a serial killer who believes he's going through a transformation. Now I say technically the first film, as the series distanced itself from that movie pretty quickly, and they deliberately didn't present this as being a sequel. This was of course in a time before constant reboots and remakes, and you can totally see LAMBS as its own thing. The entire creative team is completely different along with the actors. Well, except for Frankie Faison and Dan Butler, but they play different characters in both films. Where they are sort of connected though is through Dino De Laurentiis, who owned the rights to Harris's book. Manhunter bombed so badly though that he gave the rights away to Orion for free. Which, it's a bold strategy, Cotton, but it did actually pay off for him. This is where it comes back around, and he ended up producing the other sequels in the franchise. This included Hannibal, Red Dragon, and Hannibal Rising, which is a prequel, but you know what I mean. Red Dragon was also a redo of Manhunter, with him of course being involved in both. Hopkins ended up returning for that as well, and he basically remade the movie and had it go on to be a hit. Those other films didn't fare as well as LAMBS did though, and I always feel like he kinda wishes he kept his name on this one. But again, the main difference is that the protagonist is a woman, which adds a different dynamic to the movie. She picks up on things with the victims that the men don't, such as seeing clues in the nail polish.
She's not local. Her ears are pierced 3 times, and there's a glitter nail polish. It looks like town to me.
At the first victim, Frederica's, her father also says that the police searched the house several times. They found nothing, but Clarice quickly comes across the clues in the back of the music box. Men don't typically tend to have them, but Clarice probably did, and thus she's familiar with where things are stored in them. Now, one thing that the film doesn't quite hammer home is that Lecter hasn't seen a woman in 8 years. It's mentioned in passing, but they never touch upon why they've kept him away. There it explains Clarice is the exact type of woman he'd target, and knowing that adds even more to the movie. Though we hear how he attacked a nurse, I don't think they fully drive home how much this guy's a danger to women, as we only really see him going after men. Putting on my film analysis hat, which along with my... If you're wondering why I'm wearing this, it's because I thought, what would an FBI agent in the 90s wear if he was off duty? And this is what I came up with. But putting on my film analysis hat, yeah? This could be because these are some of the people who stand as an affront to Clarice, but let me know below if you have a better take, or a better suit I could wear, which I'm sure you do. I'm not wearing the Hannibal Lecter mask though, we've got enough people unsubscribing as it is. So at this point though, I must remind you to like the video, cause I'd like me. Dear me. However, if you love looking at movies in depth, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and also check out our partners at Arrow Video. They've just launched their brand new 4K Blu-ray box set of the film. That's the perfect way to watch it. The transfer in the film makes it the best it's ever looked, and it also comes with some amazing art cards and a poster. It's got this book as well, loads of trivia. Just click my link in the description, use the code HEAVYSPOILERS, and you're gonna get 10% off. Cheers. Now halfway through the assault course, we see Clarice is called to Crawford and linger on the man looking at her. She enters an elevator filled with men before finally making it to the department. Poking her head around the corner of an office, we see a chalkboard at the back with some great details on it. Shoutouts to Reddit user Throwaway Overrated, who pointed out how we see text that links to Buffalo Bill. On it we can see the quote, "How do you like your blue-eyed boy?" and the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are both lines from the 1920 poem Buffalo Bill by E.E. Cummings. In Crawford's office, Clarice is stunned by what she sees, including a newspaper about Bill skinning his victims. The creative team wanted to make things as realistic as they could and consulted the FBI when making the movie. This included Scott Glenn, who based Jack on the real-life FBI agent John Douglas. At the time, he was hunting the Green River Killer, who was later arrested in 2001. Douglas coached Glenn on how to act, with the actor thanking him for allowing him to see into his world. Douglas is then said to have told him that if he really wanted to get into it, then he should listen to the Van Killer tapes. These can actually be found on YouTube and are so disturbing that people had to leave the courtroom when they were being played. When doing my research for this video, I checked them out to see, and yeah, I have to say, it's by far the most messed up thing I think I've come across whenever doing research for a film or TV show. Glenn felt the same way as well and said he'd never heard screams like that in his life. Apparently he broke down crying and later said he felt like he'd lost a sense of innocence. These tapes are used in real life to make agents less sensitive, and it really shows how authentic they wanted to make the movie. I feel like the word authentic's the best way to describe the film, and everything feels grounded and real. Now there's lots of things here that clearly laid the groundwork for shows like The X-Files. Chris Carter admitted that Clarice inspired Dana Scully, and the episode Beyond the Sea is clearly riffing off the movie. This is Dana going to a killer played by Brad Dourif, who claims he's getting messages from her dead father. The whole setup's very similar, and the FBI were apparently really happy with the movie. They saw a massive uptick in women wanting to join, with the character helping to generate interest. Crawford discusses how they're trying a new tactic where they interview killers in the hopes of gaining insights. This is something the FBI were trialing at the time, with Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper both getting interviewed. This was chronicled in the Netflix show Mindhunter, which also took clear inspiration from this movie. Bundy inspired Buffalo Bill as well, namely with his tactics to lure in women. We see James Gum, aka Bill, pretending to struggle getting furniture in his van due to a cast that he has on his arm. He then uses this as a trap to lock Catherine Martin in his van, which is something Bundy also did as well. There's various accounts of him faking having a broken arm and struggling to carry some books. He'd then drop them in front of women and trap the ones that then offered help. They also based Bill on Ed Gein, who skinned and then would even build furniture out of people. It's a really dark subject matter that they perfectly bring into the movie, and Crawford gives the warning that you don't want Lecter inside your head.
Just do your job, but never forget what he is.
And what is that?
Oh, he's a monster.
Chilton then goes on to say he's never met an FBI agent quite as attractive and offers to be Clarice's guide on a night out. Guy's creepy and a complete opportunist, with him recording Lecter and Clarice's conversations. This is done on a Nagra SNST spy recorder, which was used by the CIA in the 60s and 70s. According to IMDb Trivia, this was specifically developed for covert use, and it was made to be compact and extremely quiet. So Chilton using this has its own creepy edge to it too. He tells Clarice about the time he bit a nurse, which is something we also see playing out in Hannibal. However, an important line Chilton says is,
His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
Now later on, when Lecter's in the ambulance, we hear the paramedic say,
Pressure is 130 over 90. Yeah, that's right, 90. Pulse 84.
This comes after him having just killed 2 officers and having snuck out wearing one's face. Most people's heart, it would be pounding away due to the adrenaline of this daring escape, but again, his pulse never goes above 85. Chilton also tells her the rules.
Pass him nothing but soft paper, no pencils or pens.
However, he forgets this rule himself and later takes a pen with him when encountering Lecter. Lecter uses this pen to escape, and in the end, this is what gets Chilton killed. He also makes it clear that the pair shouldn't touch, but this is a rule the character later breaks when grabbing the file from him. Either way, we meet Barney, and in the build up to this introduction, we see the men in the room staring at Clarice before meeting his gaze. Clarice then walks along the corridor where the killers stare at her from their cages. These eyes are of course embodied in Lecter, whose gaze is unforgettable. Now, though the iconic scene of Clarice walking up to the glass is thought to be his first appearance, he actually shows up less than a minute before. When entering the first security room, we get a split-second shot at some of the monitors and can catch him chilling on his bed. There he is, the late great Hannibal Lecter. He's having a friend for dinner. Ba-doom. Now, Lecter has of course become a pop culture icon, with it being the role Anthony Hopkins is probably going to be remembered for. Before this movie, he was known for things like The Elephant Man, and even in his prior film, he just played a hostage. After this though, it's almost impossible to separate him from Lecter, and Martha Stewart, she even said she broke up with him because she just saw him as the killer. However, he wasn't the first choice, and Demi originally approached Sean Connery. He said though, he just didn't bond with his script.
James Bond.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Daniel Day-Lewis were also considered, but it's difficult to imagine anybody else playing him. Even though he had less than 25 minutes of screen time, he still went on to win the Best Actor Oscar. He immediately holds your attention, and when creating his performance, Hopkins said he studied reptiles. He said that they only blink when they want to, and do it consciously. Thus, Lecter only blinks at intentional points in the film when it highlights something special. The first of these comes when he notices Clarice isn't a real FBI agent after she flashes her badge. Now, though she didn't learn from the corners, she did learn from this interaction. Later on, when she flashes her badge to Bill, we see she does it quickly so he doesn't have a chance to read it. Look how fast that is, it's sneaky. It's a great way to show how much he pays attention to Lecter though, and those long stares, they just bring you in and grip you. Now, from the start, the character's playing games and he actually gives away Bill's location. Clarice asks him about his art and he says,
"That is the Duomo seen from the Belvedere."
Now, in real life, the Duomo is in Florence. Being from the Belvedere is extremely important though, as Bill's later found in Belvedere, Ohio. To get here, Clarice also crosses a bridge akin to the one that sort of builds off the painting. So right from the beginning of the movie, he's telling her where to go. Looking at the sequels as well, guess where Lecter ends up fleeing to? That's right, the character ends up heading to Florence after killing Chilton. Now, I know I've talked about the sequels probably more than I should because the sequel book Hannibal wasn't written until 1999. However, it shows how well thought out these stories are and how there's little clues and breadcrumbs that have major repercussions. Lecter's also had to draw this picture from memory due to him not being allowed out his cell. He points out the importance of details and memories, and these lines are extremely important to remember. Crawford also tells Starling to take it out of his cell if he sketches and also what he sketches. So they're pretty much spelling it all out to the audience, but it takes a couple of watches to truly pick up on it. Now, in the book, we learn a lot more of his backstory and even get some of his inner thoughts, which makes him seem even more sadistic. At his therapy, he empowered psychopathic clients because he wanted more killers out in the world. He finds that entertaining and was fascinated by the insane. It's both intelligent and freakish people that entertain him, and thus he ran his therapy as a way to get more people for his amusement. Those who bored him he killed, and he's now fascinated with Clarice. They have what can only be described as a tete-a-tete, which is a word I'm using because I'm fancy. Now, every time I see this scene described, that's what they say, it's a tete-a-tete. Now, Clarice shows a lot of respect to Lecter, and she calls him Dr. Lecter throughout. I think this and her charm wins him round, and he becomes somewhat protective of her. He asks what multiple MIGs said to her, and she clarifies that it was "I can smell your C word." This was later given a nod to the X-Files during season 9. Mulder was locked in the cell, and as Scully approached him, he said that he could smell her.
I smelled you coming, Clarice.
Now, this doesn't go down too well with Lecter, and he ends up talking Miggs into swallowing his own tongue. It's such a creepy detail, and just imagining someone can make you die with a word, your mind kind of goes to all the things he might have said. Subscribe to the channel. Miggs isn't a pushover either, and the book gives us some hints about who he was. Being placed next to Lecter shows he was highly dangerous, and it's presumed that he suffered from DID. This is dissociative identity disorder, hence the name Multiple Miggs. Lecter even smells her through the holes in his cell, but he talks about her skincare routine and perfume. She then goes into the case on Bill, and after mentioning how he ate his trophies instead of keeping them, he asks her for the questionnaire.
Oh, Agent Starling, you think you can dissect me with this blunt little tool?
Apparently Hopkins improvised this mocking of Foster's accent on the spot, with her reaction being genuine. Foster said she felt a bit like she was being personally attacked, but later thanked Hopkins for getting her to give such a genuine reaction. And as for Hopkins' accent, that helped to shape the character too. Lecter was originally credited as being from Baltimore, and Gene Hackman even owned the rights at one point. He was planning to play Lecter and also potentially direct as well. However, he saw himself in Mississippi Burning and decided he felt uneasy about doing violent roles. However, there was a time where he was going to star with Michelle Pfeiffer, which we can imagine in some what-if universe. Either way, you can sort of piece together how Hackman would have played it, with Hopkins changing the character. The later films and books told his backstory, in which they revealed he lived in Lithuania. He then moved through Greater Europe before going to the US, which explains his strange accent. However, it shows how much Hopkins made the role his own, and how they basically built the character's entire backstory around his performance. As you guys know, I'm also a massive Batman fan as well, and he was also extremely influential on Calendar Man and The Long Halloween. Either way, we get the classic line,
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
In the work, this Chianti was an Amarone, with Hopkins altering the line. As for fava beans, they're steeped in history and have both medical and almost mythical uses. It's said that Pythagoras refused to eat them as he thought they contained the souls of the dead. Known for their flesh-like texture, they apparently go well with meat. Human meat. However, in medical terms, they also interfere with antidepressants. Shoutouts to Faulty Cuisine on Reddit for pointing out that this highlights Lecter was literally off his meds by eating them. Telling Clarice to fly, 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 fly. He's making fun of her name being Starling, as Starling is a bird, and birds are laced throughout the soundtrack, including the opening score. A huge shoutouts to Rob Ager for pointing that out, and he also pointed out that the credits end with birds chirping over it. At Frederica's house, we also see a photo of her holding a bird with her father. Lastly, when Clarice catches up with Bill, we can hear birds chirping in the background.
Yeah,
Now, as Clarice walks past Miggs, he pretends he's cut himself before throwing himself in her face. Probably can't show any of this on YouTube because it's getting to that point with limiting videos, but if you know, you know. Interesting bit of trivia here, guys, right? I read the book when I was about 15 or 16, and up until this point, yeah, I thought it was spelled C-U-M, but in the work, it's spelled C-O-M-E.
Wow.
So yeah, only thing I remembered, but we learned something, and yeah, you don't care, and I'm a piece of shit. What you do care about, though, is Lecter's reaction here, in which he shouts for Starling to come back. The Now Playing podcast pointed out how he knows she's probably not returning to the cells after the thing with Miggs, so he's giving her a clue in the hopes that she does. Looking at the scene, you can see he's a desperate man, and it's really the only time he raises his voice. Just him pressed up against the glass, desperately calling her, shows he's besotted and wants to see her again. Now, as for that clue, he says,
listen carefully, look deep within yourself, Clarice Starling.
Look deep within yourself, and later she goes to the yourself storage lockup. We then see she goes to her car, which is a grey Ford Pinto. This was picked because of how bland it is, with it painting out Clarice as being a plain Jane. With this scene, we also get a flashback of her seeing her father, who we learn was a policeman. In the prior scene with Lecter, he mistakenly guessed she came from poor white trash, but we see that wasn't the case. It also explains why she wanted to go into the FBI, and we cut to her on the firing range. Unflinching when firing the gun, it highlights the determination she carries. She then does a training exercise, goes for a run with her friend Map, where they're set up by men, and then looks across news articles on Hannibal. Crawford is shown in the photo alongside with him, even though it was Will Graham who arrested him. There were thoughts that they should include a line or photo, but again, didn't want to link this too heavily to Manhunter. Told Miggs is dead by Crawford, he says,
Look, I know it got ugly today.
Today? All that was one day. Now, mate, as soon as I get jizz thrown at me, I'm off for the rest of the year. Anyway, Clarice goes to the yourself storage, which is kind of used as a plot shortcut for her to jump ahead in the case. The book pad things out, but there are a lot of things going on here. However, it does make things a bit convoluted with the severed mannequin head and also the head in the jar. In the movies, this was done by Bill, with Lecter putting the corpse there before he then got to work. The workers time to flesh it out with some side characters, but they just shorten things and have it as James Gumm's ex-lover. In the work, he isn't gay though, and at the time the movie got a lot of backlash from the LGBTQ+ community. The movie does condemn the idea that trans people are violent though, so it's not like it's even trying to hammer home that message.
There's no correlation in the literature between transsexualism and violence. Transsexuals are very passive.
It was still widely protested against though, and the Now Playing podcast brought up how at the time the gay community was dealing heavily with the prejudice over the AIDS epidemic. Thus painting them out as killers, it could cause further problems. Demi says he regrets not hammering home enough the reason that Gunn became Bill, which was because of his childhood. He said he wanted to make it clear that abuse in these formative years is a massive factor to making these killers, but that the focus kind of got lost. I feel like he regrets feeling like he might have caused the gay and trans community harm, and the next movie he went on to make was Philadelphia, which you can kind of chalk up to this. As for Gunn, we learned that he wanted gender reassignment, but psychologically he didn't pass the test and was then denied. Lecter says he's not actually trans and that he's something different. Now throughout his home we see things like a swastika stitched into his bedsheet. There's also a picture on a wall which could highlight there's this darkness within him. However, beyond that, the creative team dotted lots of controversial memorabilia throughout his house to give us more insight into the character. This indicated that Gum had tried to fit himself into lots of different ideologies, but he couldn't find a place where he fit. So his belief that he had to change gender was another thing that tied into this. Also, every time I bring up swastikas, I know I get people pointing out it's a religious symbol as well. When I'm talking about it being problematic there, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, yeah? Just making sure, because I still get comments, and yeah, I'm talking about all the bad stuff associated with it. I will probably get demonetized for, but you know exactly what I mean. Now either way, Gum is psychotic, and he felt like he had to find other ways to change gender since he was denied medically. That's why he develops the skin suit, as in his mind that's gonna be what will change him. In the locker, we also see an eagle along with an American flag draped over the hearse. Because of this, there has been theories Demi was commenting on the rise of the serial killer in America and how American culture may be attributed to this. Bundy and several others have said they found things in their childhood that depicted violence, and this spurred them on. Back then it was comics, which then had the code brought in to sanitize them. Today we see video games blamed a lot, and it's thought this is why the articles are here. Whether that's the case or not, I'll let you decide, but I thought it was at least worth bringing up. Either way, Clarice returns to Lecter, who opens up a drawer for her. I love how when she looks about the cell in the darkness, nobody's there, but he then appears where she just looked.
How did you...
Such a great line, with Clarice pointing out that he seemingly appeared out the dark. Demi wanted to give him this feeling of being almost supernatural, which we see when Clarice approached the cell originally. There he stood staring directly at Clarice, but in doing this, he's staring right into the camera. Demi said he wanted to give the feeling he was almost aware of the audience and had a heightened sense of awareness in which he knew everything. I feel like Chilton is tapped into this idea of him being a demon as well. Technically, Miggs is classed as his 10th kill, but it's not like they can lock him up again. So they've taken away his books and paintings and are now blasting religious programs directly into his cell. After the lights go on, Lecter offers a psychological profile of Bill, but in exchange he wants a deal. A cell with a window and a bit of a view, and YouTube on all the time on the Heavy Spoilers show. He says time is running short and Bill will be searching for another victim, which is when we cut to Catherine. Played by Brooke Smith, she gained £25 for the role, as Bill said to covet larger women. When he shoves her in the van, he asks at her dress size and then looks at it to make sure she's a 14. I did wonder if this was because they'd have more skin and thus be easier to make a suit out of, which is a pretty mental thing to think about. Either way, we catch her singing American Girl by Tom Petty in The Heartbreakers. It pretty much sets the scene for what kind of victim she is, and we learn she's a senator's daughter. Tying back to the flag and eagle, it's possible that this is done to show the victims of American culture will be American girls. Again, just analysing it, not slagging you guys off if you're watching this in the US, mate. Don't dump the tea, mate. Do not dump the tea. I love American culture, obviously, but yeah, we're trying to see if there's deeper layers to it. We then catch Bill watching her through night vision goggles, which he of course uses in the basement. Pulling up to her home, we also see a cat in the window waiting for her. Cats also appear throughout the movie at several points. At Frederica's house, we see a photo of her holding a cat, and then right after, there's a cat figure in front of the jewelry box. The cat also leads Clarice to the cupboard where she finds the diamond dress. The diamond dress also resembles the diamond shapes he cuts into the victims, which we see at the autopsy, as this will give him the most amount of skin. As she walks into this room, we also see a picture of a cat on the wall. Catherine is also sometimes shortened to Cat, and it's one of the many animals in the movie, along with buffaloes, starlings, and lambs. In the back of the van, we hear Bill punching Catherine several times, and this is then mirrored in the scene at Quantico. As part of the sparring session, we see men wailing on Clarice, and it plays into the themes of men attacking women. Hearing that a body's been found, they end up flying out, and we learn more about Frederica. She was the first victim, but they found her third because he took the time to weigh down the body. After this, he got lazy and didn't care, but it highlights how he held Frederica above the rest. This gives Clarice enough to determine several things about him. Visiting the funeral home, we see as the male officers all stare at her, and she gets a flashback of the death of her father. Her father again is a death she couldn't avert, and him silently laying in the coffin plays into the title. They then examine the body, and you might notice that Clarice and Crawford have a white substance around their nose. I mean, it was Hollywood in the 90s, but this was actually to block the smell. The two morticians don't have this, as they're used to dealing with dead bodies and also used to the smell. There's also lots of clear allusions to Twin Peaks as well, with this having a tie to David Lynch. Lynch and Dino De Laurentiis actually had a deal together, and this is why the pair both made Dune. Laurentiis called on him to help make Manhunter, but he did Blue Velvet instead. So it could be a nod to his work, and Clarice notices her fingernails and that she tried to claw her way out of something, which we get confirmed in the well. Catherine ends up looking about it and she sees fingernails broken off in the wall. Crawford and Clarice have a bit of back and forth, as she's annoyed he's told the policeman not to discuss things in front of a woman. He says that this was just to get them to go away, but Clarice says it matters. People look on him on how to act, and dismissing women like this, it isn't going to help them be taken seriously. Going to some bug experts, these guys appear at the end of the ceremony. Clarice actually ends up with one of these dudes in the book, and you're single, mate.
Are you hitting on me, Doctor?
Yes.
Now here the moth was looked after, and that somebody loved him, and then cut to the moths in Bill's basement. Apparently these were treated like royalty as well, with the creative team giving them limos, little protective suits that had the skull's head painted on, and luscious tanks. Back at Quantico, we see a news report saying Bill's kidnapped Catherine and watch Clarice and Mapp walk down the stairs. On the wall we see a picture of the FBI director, and this is the legendary Roger Corman. He appears around the hour mark with his setting up his arrival there. He also cameoed in The Godfather Part 2, and yeah, breakdown on the channel now. The senator then gives a message where they point out how she constantly uses her name Catherine. They say this is smart as it personalizes the character and makes them more than just an object. This is something the FBI advise, and it also works as a direct opposite to Bill. Bill constantly refers to Catherine as it, which gives us the classic line.
Now it places the lotion in the basket.
Clarice then goes to Lecter with a deal in which he'll be transferred to a prison with books, a wood, and for 1 week a year he'll get to go to Plum Island. Yay, Plum Island. He can walk on the beach and swim in the ocean for an hour with SWAT team surveillance. Sounds too good to be true, mate. And it's cause it is. It was a fucking lie.
So that was a fucking lie.
The deal is completely made up to get Lecter's cooperation, and I like how Clarice kinda gets one over on him. It shows she's ready to play dirty too, but Lecter wants more. Crawford warned her not to let him in her head, and she tells him personal things. This is namely the death of her father, who we learn was shot after surprising 2 burglars. We discover her mother died when she was young, and then her dad's death left her with nothing. Thus she got moved to the ranch with her mother's cousin, but the thing with the sheep had her sent to a home. So she's clawed her way up from nothing, and it shows how much she's a fighter. Revealing this about herself also brings her closer to Lecter, which we see in the reflection in the glass. I believe that this is the first time the two appear on screen at the same time, and they use this reflection to place them together. They're not fully lined up, but it creates the effect that the two are getting closer. Now he tells Clarice to look in medical records and see who's been rejected from gender assignment. Now according to IMDb trivia, there was a large subplot that was filmed, but in the end they decided to cut it. They ended up going to the Johns Hopkins Hospital, where a doctor initially rejected giving out records. However, he then relented and cooperated. Anyway, the movie was also going to have Clarice going to Catherine's apartment where she'd be confronted by her mother. This would be alongside Paul Crenler, who we'll no doubt talk about more in the future. They tell them the fake deal is off, and both Clarice and Crawford are disgraced because of it. The book tells us he nearly has to go for early retirement, and there's a big chance that she's not going to graduate. I think it's also important to know that both are off the case when Lecter escapes, which is why neither are blamed. However, in the expanded stuff, Crenler was going to try and pin it on them. Clarice then transfers the case and is suspended, but she asks to take a leave of absence and then goes to Belvedere. There she investigates Frederica again with her new perspective, and Crawford's reinstated because of Lecter's tip-off. This then leads into the end, but they streamlined the movie and cut this all out. Anyway, with Bill, we meet his little dog Precious. You know, you might recognize this dog from The Burbs, where it played the character Queenie. Two classics under the belt. Bill then says,
"Put the fucking lotion in the basket!"
Such a messed up way to say it, and this moment always stuck with me. Kind of like his politeness drops and the darker side comes out. He then mimics her screaming, and though it seems like he's mocking her, we know from interviews what this was supposed to be. Bill is looking at what a woman does and copying their mannerisms in the hopes of becoming one. Also, just to let you guys know, I've really started posting on Instagram, so if you guys want to see all the big channel announcements before anybody else and don't mind the odd selfie, then please follow me at Heavy Spoilers. Now from here we cut to Chilton mocking Lecter in his cell, and we see as he plays with a pen in his mouth. He leaves this on a piece of paper, which we see Lecter looking at. Chilton tells him the deal is false and says that if he tells him who Bill is, he'll get him a new deal. He's in it for the publicity, which we see exemplified at the hour 5 mark. Lecter demands to see the senator, and we see as he's sent to Washington with his iconic mask being donned. Chilton then looks about for his pen to sign the paperwork, but he can't find it. No idea how Lecter managed to get it, but yeah, it ties in with the idea that he's almost supernatural.
Is it true what they're saying?
Huh?
Some kind of vampire?
Taunting the senator, we can see takes glee in asking about how she breastfed her daughter. Talking about phantom limb syndrome, he wonders aloud if she'll tingle when she finds her daughter's dead. In regards to Bill, he also says,
Buffalo Bill's real name is Louis Friend.
Louis Friend is an anagram of iron sulfide, or rather fool's gold. The book has him giving the name Billy Rubin, which is a play on Billy Rubin. According to IMDb trivia, this is a pigment found in feces, and this was originally supposed to be in the script. Something Rob Eger pointed out though is rather than using music, they use the sound of a revving plane to build tension.
Wait a minute.
Yes, I did.
Toughened your nipples, didn't it?
Giving a description, Clarice later ends up visiting his cell with his paintings. Also, always great seeing Charles Napier, who plays Lieutenant Boyle. You might recognize him from Rambo 2, Philadelphia, and also Austin Powers.
People will say we're in love.
Now you do get this kind of one-sided attraction between them, and Lecter caresses her finger with his finger when he puts the file through the bars. There's lots of things said in the touching of hands, which we later see with Crawford at the graduation. We linger on the handshake, and there's the feeling that there's an unrequited love between them. In the book, Crawford had just lost his wife, and he bonded with Clarice over the loss of her father. In this moment, one of the people that grabs her is also the legendary horror director George A. Romero. Lecter tells her Bill would cover what he saw, and this leads her back to looking at the first victim. She goes to the airport, and we get another man clearly looking at her as he crosses in front of her path. With Lecter, we then cut to the drawing and can see the 3 crosses. Shoutouts to Heathen Febe on Reddit for pointing out that these actually allude to her roots. They pointed out these coffin dapper crosses also are present outside Craigsville in Nicholas County. Apparently they're found all over the region and are present on the Patson mountainside. Bernard Coffindaffer put them up after having a vision during a heart bypass surgery in which he said he saw the Holy Spirit. This told him to build the crosses and spread the message, and it's basically Lecter sort of mocking her roots. Bringing up parts of the pen, we then see him coolly and calmly killing the officers.
Are you and you are Sergeant Pembry?
Now the original plan was to have Lecter wear a yellow jumpsuit at this point, which is what Demi wanted to go with. However, Hopkins insisted that he wore white, and this contrasts the blood perfectly. Hopkins said it made him appear more clinical, and he got the idea from his fear of dentists. As the guards roll up the art, we can also see the magazine Bon Appetit. This is obviously about eating, and Lecter then goes on to bite one of the guards. Beating Ball to death, we see him listening to music before picking up the razor, which in hindsight we know was used to make his mask. Ironically, we have the 2 villains of the film using skin to appear differently, with Bill of course using skin as well. Now watching this and really paying attention to the details, I noticed a way in which Clarice could have stopped this from happening. The file that Lecter gave her had a clue in this, which Lecter had drawn on the map. Knowing what we know, he used the pen he stole to do this, and Clarice could have put two and two together. As Chilton said earlier, he's not allowed to have them, and had she looked at this, then she could have let them know what was going on. Either way, Boyle is strung up in a crucifixion pose with the blue, red and white banners tying him up. Again, it ties in the idea of the flags, and this could play into that. It's also worth noting that this moment in itself is based on the work of Sir Francis Bacon. Lecter has a clean getaway because the police are so tied up in believing he's on the elevator roof, and we also get a cameo in the scene by Chris Isaac. Matt then warns Clarice that Lecter's out, but she says he won't come after her. She says he'd consider it rude, and it kinda speaks to his principles. Going to Frederica's home, she then sees the photos suggesting that she and Gum had a relationship. In the book, she writes him one last love letter from the pit, and it's clear he was fascinated with her. Clarice then finds the dress with the cuts in the back, and figures out that he's good at sewing and is making a suit. Calling Crawford, we hear how he believes that they know where Gum is. They had the photo and just need to lock in, but unfortunately they get to the wrong address. Cutting to Gum at home, we get what's probably the most famous scene in this movie. Donning makeup and wearing a woman's scalp, we get the whole tuck thing. Now Ted Levine really puts himself out there, and he was the one who said they had to do this scene. He felt this would instantly let you know everything you need to know about him, and just let you know exactly why he is the way he is. Not only does he wear a woman's scalp, he also wears what's known as a fat lady necklace, and we can also see he has a chest tattoo of a bloody rib. In the Bible, Adam gives up a rib to make Eve, so this tattoo plays into the idea that he's making himself a woman. We then see as Clarice visits Frederica's friend from her house, and the pair talk about whether she knew James Gum. We then learn she's to do alterations for a woman named Mrs. Lipman. This is whose house Bill's in, and this is the body that Clarice finds in the bathtub. It's believed that Gum took over the house and that he either killed Lipman or found her dead. Upon arriving there, Gum tells Clarice that Mrs. Lipman moved, but this is something Frederica's friend Stacy would have likely known. This is a really small town, and that she'd be aware if she went away. Instead, it's believed that Gum took this address and imprisoned his victims and kept paying the bills to not arouse suspicion. This is also why the FBI get the wrong house, though that is his actual address. I absolutely love the way they edit the two door knocks together though, and it's so good the way they put the scenes together. Realizing the place looks a bit off, she quickly puts two and two together. Also, you can see a little fishing wire on that moth as it lands on the thread. You disgraceful actor, get out the film if you need a threads. Now this leads into the pair descending into the basement. A brilliant point that Rob Egger brought up is that this subliminally builds off the basement at the asylum. Normally in places like this, you'd have all white walls, which is how Lecter's cells depicted in Manhunter. However, they created an almost medieval-like dungeon that's filled with brown and grey brickwork. Just as Clarice had to descend into that to go and meet Lecter, the basement here also has a similar style to it. It really helps the visual marrying of these moments, and we see she has to confront the killer in the dark. Followed by Bill, we see his POV through the night vision goggles and sees he stalks Clarice. Just the way he reaches for her, she stumbles round blindly. It's almost like a cat playing with its prey. Hearing the gun click, we see she then turns around and shoots at him. Hitting the window, it allows light to come in, and she manages to kill him before he kills her. Also, you might notice that there's a mark on her cheek which is explained in the novel. This is caused by gunpowder, which burns so hot it leaves a mark that's even brought up in Hannibal.
You okay?
Gunpowder, it's nothing. Okay.
This is something we see on her face at the hour 51 mark as it stays with the character. Lastly, we see the butterfly spinning before cutting to Clarice at the graduation. A slice of justice is literally served as we see the cake being cut up on that word. Matt goes to tell her that she has a call, and we see my bug guy grabbing the glass so he has a reason to talk to her when she comes back. Smooth. The call from Lecter then comes in, and it's the late great Hannibal Lecter. He's having a friend for dinner. Chilton has arrived, and we see him being escorted by security, but unfortunately for him, it won't be enough. Donning a disguise, Lecter stalks him through the crowd, and we then get the credits rolling over the top. This is one of the longest continuous shots in cinema history, with it lasting for over 5 minutes. It rolls all the way through the credits, and you can sit there and watch Lecter walking up the street. He's out of Clarice's grasp and out of Oz too, and now all we can do is sit here helplessly and watch as he walks out into the world. Now there was originally an alternate ending where Lecter would call Clarice and tell her that she looked good in her blue suit. This hinted that he was still close at hand, and we'd then end the call with it being revealed he was in Chilton's home. Chilton was tied up in the chair, and Lecter would say, "Well, shall we begin?" tying back to his comments with the 2 security guards. This was deemed as a bit too full on though, and instead they opted to go with this more ambiguous ending. I think it's the best way to do it, and what a phenomenon this would end up being. Lecter has pretty much become a pop culture icon at this point, with the movie becoming legendary. As mentioned, it got that Best Picture Oscar, with Hopkins winning one as well. Jodie had already won the Best Actress Oscar before, and she ended up getting another for this movie. It's an absolutely legendary film, and its influences can still be felt today. You watch something like Longlegs and you immediately think of this, and Matt Reeves even said it inspired the Batman. We've done a video on Longlegs, and luckily for you guys, the Batman's a film that I'm doing next. We will be breaking it down in depth right before the Penguin, so make sure you subscribe to the channel, and obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Silence of the Lambs below. If you want to listen to these on the go in audio format, we also have a podcast version of them available, which will be linked in the description. Please drop a like on the video, and also if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes a massive way towards helping us out. If you want to get some Heavy Spoilers merch, you've also got our t-shirt line located just below the video that will let you pick up all kinds of tops like our House of Dragon stuff, the Marvel stuff's there, we're doing a Penguin one soon, Alien Chestburster, and a lot more. We drop new designs on there all the time too, so definitely keep an eye out. Now if you want something else to watch, yeah, that Longlegs breakdown, go watch that, it's a good one. It's genuinely, no it is, it's a good one, so go watch it. We're also doing The Matrix at the moment, so if you want something a bit more lighthearted that goes in depth as well, then definitely head over there right after this. With out of the way, I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.